Welcome. My name is Thomas Allen Munn, and I'm the author of Payback: Why the Top 1% Must Invest in the Rest, and How It Can Renew America. I wrote Payback to deal explicitly with an ongoing trend that politicians of all stripes have refused to admit exists. Over the last 40 years, the gap between what it costs to live the American dream and the market income of ordinary workers has widened from a gully to a canyon. This canyon now threatens the future of the middle class, and if nothing is done, Americans with ordinary skills will fall out of the middle class. Payback proposes a tax policy that will enable capitalism not only to save the middle class, but to grow and make it more prosperous. Since Payback digs deeply into the weeds, I've recorded this Q&A to give readers a quick take on it. To make this Q&A easier for readers to digest, I've divided it into 15 sections. Payback is free to read on a website that I've created for the convenience of readers. It's my hope that Payback will contribute to a national dialogue on tax policy that I believe will take place sometime in the next decade. Now let's get started with the Q&A. Part 1. An inescapable truth is that most middle-class workers don't earn enough market income to maintain a middle-class standard of living. The first question: why have you written Payback? Why the top 1% must invest in the rest? Well, because I believe that the fate of the middle class, the foundation of America's greatness, depends on making fundamental changes in tax policy, and I don't see anyone else discussing this. Explain the issue that no one else is discussing that you think is so important. Payback is premised on one big inescapable truth. This truth is that the wages of millions of workers with ordinary skills are being suppressed by two inexorable forces: automation and globalization, that pose a grave threat to the continuation of the American dream for these workers. Next question: what do you mean by the term ordinary skills? The labor market is composed of many submarkets. The workers within each submarket can be divided into two categories: those with ordinary skills and those with extraordinary skills. Each submarket determines whether a skill set is ordinary or extraordinary, and that ordinary skills are paid below average and or falling wages, while extraordinary skills are paid above average and or rising wages. I believe that an increasing number of skill sets in an increasing number of submarkets have been rendered ordinary by automation and globalization, and this has made most middle-class workers subject to the iron law of wages. All right, question: what is the iron law of wages? Well, my answer is the iron law of wages is a term that was coined in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution to describe what happens to the wages of workers in a particular labor market when the number of workers in that market grows faster than the demand for their services. Capitalism demands that the wages of workers in such a market must fall. The iron law of wages, therefore, poses a deadly threat to the wages of millions of middle-class workers. I believe that tax policy is the most practical and least disruptive way to cope with the suppression of the wages of middle-class workers. Acceptance of this premise forces a rethinking of many issues, such as the need to increase the progressivity of taxes, end taxation's corruption of capitalism, and raise the level of taxation. Question: how is the iron law of wages relevant to America in 2021? The short answer is it will determine the fate of the middle class. For the last two generations, globalization and automation have been displacing workers with ordinary skills at an accelerating rate. In today's economy, workers with ordinary skills are vulnerable to displacement at any moment. As the word ordinary suggests, workers with ordinary skills make up most workers. So a majority of workers are in a more precarious position than they may realize. In reality, globalization enables capitalists to roam the world and hire the cheapest labor, and automation enables capitalists to replace workers with less expensive computers and machines. As vulnerable workers are displaced, they join a growing labor pool composed of other such workers. A growing pool of displaced workers, coupled with dwindling demand for them, means the wages of these workers, as dictated by the iron law of wages, must fall. Suppose you're right and the iron law of wages will suppress the wages of millions of workers with ordinary skills. What are the implications? Well, there are two sets of implications. One viewed from the standpoint of affected families, and one from America as a whole. As the iron law of wages suppresses the wages of more and more workers, their families won't have enough income to lead a middle-class standard of living, much less save for their retirement, pay for their own health care, and post-secondary education of their children. As the financial stress on these families intensifies, so too will their sense of insecurity and anxiety. A society with millions of families ridden with insecurity and anxiety will inevitably lead to mass social and political unrest. Next question. Now, what are the effects of low wages on America as a whole? On the surface, lowering labor costs helps capitalists increase their profits and allows consumers to buy cheaper goods and services. Beneath the surface, however, low wages for millions of workers endanger the economy and the middle class. Over time, more and more displaced workers will lose their purchasing power, will become part of a growing demoralized and underskilled workforce, and together with other disgruntled workers, will foment social and political unrest. A shrinking consumer base, a demoralized, underskilled workforce, and a nation plagued by social and political unrest threatens America's political stability, which isn't good for business. Given the fundamentals of capitalism, the iron law of wages will continue to work its will at a faster pace. This concludes part one.